And welcome to an amazing and exciting... Oh, music's still going. Hang on, now it's going to awkwardly stop. Welcome to an amazing and exciting Tomorrow Live. My name is Jamie Higginbotham. I am joined, let's see here, on this side I've got Jared Head, and over here I've got Ryan Caton. Hopefully I did that correctly. And it's a it's a pretty exciting day. There is a big giant metal object in Texas that's trying to make frost. So I'm going to hand it over. Well, even though going into the show we had last week's slate, whatever, pretend like it's not. I think at this point, SpaceX has got a booster on the pad, right? You remember everyone talking about how long it was going to take to rebuild the pad, and yet here we are with a booster on it, and they're getting ready to make fire. And so I think that happened. I would argue that happened a lot faster than anyone thought. And so I'll kind of turn it over to Ryan. Everything's backwards. We'll turn it over to Ryan and tell us a little bit about it.
Well, there isn't really much to talk about at the moment. I can't remember if I got screen share going on my Mac. Hang on. This is really smooth. There you go, Daddy. You should be able to see it now. But I brought up a tweet. So at the moment, nothing. The booster itself isn't exactly frosty. But as we speak, the tank farm and all the things needed to make the booster frosty are starting to spool up, and with that, they'll be starting to load propellants, methane and oxygen. Fingers crossed for a static fire. And the reason we know that is because Mary Boca Chica gal got a overpressure notice through her letterbox, I assume, and those are handed out to the residents of Boca Chica Village, telling them probably not a good idea to be standing near windows in case anything goes wrong. And when those overpressure notices are delivered, that then notifies everyone else, because they're shared on Twitter, that the booster is going to be doing something a little more than just getting a little bit of liquid oxygen in there for a spin prime or something like that. So that's what we're seeing at the moment. There isn't really much more to comment on because that's all we've seen. So I don't know how to keep going from here, just on that, because that's pretty much all we've seen all day. There was a little bit of holding back, a little bit of checking out some things. We saw a couple of vans go down to the pad. They were it looks like they were working near a generator, so maybe the generator ran out of fuel, or the generator wasn't working properly, or something along those lines, but that's just pure speculation. So that's everything we've seen so far. And I will also reiterate Jamie's statement that this has all happened a lot quicker than I thought it would. Jared, you said a little bit tongue-in-cheek after the first orbital integrated flight test that Boca could be toast, and it's very much not toast anymore. It's they've really dressed it up, looking quite nice again, and fingers crossed today we'll see some fire, some good fire, not some toast fire.
Yeah, it's looking a bit instead of toasty, it's now frosty, nice and cold, and hopefully nice and wet as well down there, because they've got that interesting deluge system that I don't think any of us have ever seen at a pad before. That like metallic plate that's then going to allow water to come up through it in that circular pattern that we saw in those tweets over the past couple of weeks. And also just a shout out, of course, to NASA Spaceflight for doing such a great job with their coverage, as we're all, pretty much, I would imagine all of us have a tab open in our browsers to make sure that we have that we've got the live view from that happening right now. And yeah, there's Ryan's got some great footage there showing off that new pad, or should I say, an actual pad deluge system, to rephrase it entirely there. With what they have. So look, that's what I'm looking forward to most, is whether that's going to work or not. Simply because that was very clearly a very big issue with the first orbital flight test. So we'll have to see what ends up happening, and maybe we'll find out a little bit as to how that works from the static fire that's going to be attempted today. So we'll have to see. And here's hoping we get all 33 Raptors up and running, and they do a little bit more than just turn on. It would be nice to see them kind of, run for a bit with that there. So I was also going to kind of joke that it was like, well, everybody saw Jamie at the start of the episode. She'll be back next week with how we usually do with that. So
Yeah, and this tweet is the last Starship related tweet from SpaceX. When was this? Let's have a look. August 4th, which was Friday. So this is the latest tweet with a nice picture of Booster 9 there after what they call a chill and spin, which is the worst SpaceX rebranding of a spin prime or any name ever. It's a spin prime. Everyone's always called it a spin prime. That's what it is. You spin the turbo pumps and prime the engine, and for some reason they call it a chill and spin. It's just the 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 names keep going downhill. Interplanetary transport system. Wow, that sounds really cool. BFR. That's kind of funny. Starship. Chill and spin. All just seems a little bit, dare I say, generic and a little bit bland. Everything has
Well,
star in front of it.
Twitter is now X, so
Everything. It's just. I just feel there was a peak, and it's just gone down ever since.
I still call it Twitter. So what? So we're just still going to call them spin primes. So
I mean, that's what they are. They're spin primes. That's the proper terminology. But they make their own names up, and I don't like their own names. It's not as good.
Why do we still call it Starship? We can still it's interplanetary transport system because that's
what
it
the
was
Mars
made for.
Colonial Transporter. Let's call it
So
MCT.
yeah, or if we want to go like really old school with it, it's Falcon XX, right? So I mean, I'm just throwing that out there. So once again, just trying to remind everybody that there are some OG calls that you have to make at times, and honestly, seeing the Booster 9 Falcon XX finally getting ready to do a static fire, I'm so excited with it.
Yeah.
Oh, that's good. So, yeah, and Eka, thank you so much. That's kind of how I was hoping people were going to experience today, which is Eka saying that they're watching both this and the NASA space flight static fire, which is very, very, you could do both. I'm doing both right now. I'm doing, I guess, I imagine most of us on the show are doing a little bit more than just both of that, right? Like we're both here and watching the stream from NASA spaceflight. So good times on that front with that.
There's not really much else to add.
Yeah,
Jamie's
I wish that there was.
This is really exciting, right? But there's literally nothing else we can add on to it. They've spilled up the tank farm, and that's all they've done so far today because of their issues. So that's all we've got.
So, taking this, I'll just kind of poke it, and then hopefully I might have to step away again. But then, looking at this, again, kind of going back, I don't think anyone thought that the pad would be ready this soon, let alone another vehicle and everything else. So, throwing our speculatory hats on, what does the future look like? Like, when does the group think Starship is going to fly again? What do we think that's going to look like? And I know a lot of that has to do with like the results of the test today and whatnot, but based on where they were before, after flight test 1, what do we think flight test 2 is going to look like?
Well, I have to say, in my opinion, if this test today goes well and we get good data from the hot staging ring test, which is currently, I don't know if it's currently undergoing a test or if it will be testing soon. It's in the can crusher system at Massey. So basically, it's they put the ring with like a plate here and then a little attachment up here, and then they hook up very high, strong ropes, essentially, and then you just pull down on it to try and simulate flight forces, and they usually go past the limits, and maybe they'll test it to destruction, we don't know. So this static fire test and that test, that's kind of like my personal 2 items of this is where a big delay could occur. But assuming that both of those go smoothly, we have good data from a booster, we have good data from the hot staging ring. All they've got to do is probably roll the booster back to the production site, put the ring on top, roll it back to the pad, and then stack a ship on top of it. And they could do that within 2-3 days. I mean, this is assuming these tests go well, this could be a really quick turnaround thing. Like, we could be seeing a launch before the end of August, which is kind of mind-boggling to think about. But if you think about this on like a day-by-day basis, they can roll a booster to the production site, put the ring on it, roll it back with a ship, and stack them within half a week. It's not a difficult thing to do from what we've seen before in terms of timescales. So I think best case scenario, we really could be seeing the second launch of this thing within the next 2, 3, 4 weeks.
Yeah, so Loopy's asking, my question is always going to be, is the speed actually practical, or are they rushing in ways that will slow them down later? And that's always a really good question, which is that you don't want to sprint so fast that you trip up over your own feet. And there you go, Loopy's saying that they have this propensity to pull off these big sprints and crunches, like in 2019, early 2020, but then sit there and spin their wheels for years after. And that's kind of something that I was noticing the other day, because a friend of mine on Facebook was like, hey, is SpaceX still moving forward with their Starship thing after their first launch? I was like, yeah, well, they're going to have a second, probably third and fourth. Like, I can't imagine them not continuing on with the program. They're kind of pouring their heart and their soul and all their financials into that, so they kind of need to make it work. And my friend said, "Oh, okay. Well, just wondering, because it's, I was looking on my Facebook memories and I saw that it was 2 years ago when you posted the first photo of the first big full rocket." And I was like, "Oh yeah, it really has been 2 years since they had the actual rocket out on the pad for the first time." And it was always funny, because it really was, I guess, to kind of steal a little note from Virgin Galactic there, and modify it a bit for SpaceX, purposes. It was always 6 weeks away. It was 6 weeks away for several years, right? So it ended up being pretty humorous to me after the launch when Elon said, "Oh, well, the pad will be ready in the pad will be ready and we'll fly again in 6 to 8 weeks." So it was like,
Yeah.
Good one. No, that's not how that works. And frankly, there's still a lot more hurdles than just the vehicle that SpaceX has to clear. There's the regulatory aspect of things with launch licenses and such. SpaceX has to, as far as I know, SpaceX has not finished their own anomaly reports on things. So there's, as far as I know, the investigation is still ongoing with that. And that's something that you have to kind of do and then get cleared in order to get your launch license. And if anybody sort of understands the repercussions of what it's like to launch a vehicle without a launch license, I think SpaceX might be sort of up to bat on that one in some cases. But yeah, no, I am not optimistic on I'm not as optimistic as you, Ryan, with the end of August. By the end of August prediction, I'm thinking more mid-September, late September, even early October when they finally get it. I feel like with having to rebuild quite a lot of their pad and the orbital launch mount and this new deluge system, there's so many unknowns just on the ground that they have to figure those out. And then in addition to that, like you said, they've also got to deal with their new hot staging and some other things that they need to test on the ground first before they move anywhere else with it. So there's just a lot of things that you can't skip if you want to do something called engineering. And SpaceX tends to do engineering correctly, so I would hope that they wouldn't skip these kinds of elements.
Let's not forget that they also have to satisfy the FAA before they can fly again.
Yes, there is also that.
And I mean, a lot of that comes from the results of the investigation that they have to do, and there has been precedent of like the previous flight's investigation wrapping up only a few days before the second flight launches. Even for the first flight, the launch license was only issued like a week before they flew. So it's not like they are going to wait for a launch license, then stack it and get ready. They can stack it and get ready and just wait for all of the dominoes to fall correctly for the regulatory side to kind of catch up a little bit. Those can be happening at the same time. They can be happening simultaneously. So, yeah. I got nothing else to add on that.
Yeah, I don't either, because that's simply how it goes. So
that's their cue to have me turn my microphone and camera back on and be like, we have nothing else to add. It's like, you can come back now.
I mean, that's just our basic perspectives. Myself as myself and Dutta and Ryan sort of understanding the engineering aspect of things that have to go with it, the regulatory aspect of things. For us, this isn't like the first time we've ever seen anything like this happening. So we're just trying to make it as best as we can. So, and there sure ain't a lot of info to go on at the moment, but hey, we'll at least say something. So,
going around the room, do we have what's our theory on? Two questions, and by the way, so this is for both Jared and Ryan, but then also you in the chat room. Curious to know what you think. First question: when do you think they will fly again? And second question is, how do I word this? Because it's a test flight, so right. So as long as they gather data, it's a success. But how far into that mission test do you think they'll get?
Oh, okay. I'll go first then. Well, I saw a tweet from Elon the other day. I'm looking for it now. Basically, he said something along the lines of the next Starship flight. He's expecting 50% success. Anything, I think he wants to get to stage set. And like beyond is a bonus. So like unlike the first flight, get off the pad. Anything else is a bonus. I kind of agree with that. Get to stage set because we didn't get to stage set last time. So if we get to stage set, anything else is a bonus. I agree with that. Anything past stage set or getting to stage set and beyond is a success in my opinion. I feel like the best case scenario working 24/7 on this thing. The end of August or the start of September is the earliest we could see it. I think a more reasonable time frame to be thinking about would be September because it's beyond that kind of cognitive 4 weeks out thing. Like if it's 4 weeks in the future, okay, there's a problem for another day. It's not a problem for right now. At least that's the way I think of it. So I think September may be a more reasonable bet, but I'm gonna rule August out just yet because at the speed things are going, I could definitely see this thing launching right at the end of August.
That's aggressive. All right, you, Jared?
I know.
First of all, let me ask my dogs. What do you think? Oh, of course. They start barking and then they get quiet as soon as I ask them what's going on. Thanks. Thank you, ladies. I appreciate it. So what do I think? I think that they are not going to fly till October. I think that there's just, it's always, Richard, every time there are big engineering challenges to be made and big engineering decisions to be made, I can always hear Richard Feynman in the back of my head saying, you can't fool nature, so don't try. So to me, it's going to be October. I think not all of that is going to be engineering related. I think some of it is going to be like what QDM C12 in the chat room is saying, which is September is the height of hurricane season. So I think a lot of us forget about the fact that places like Florida and Texas are very much subject to hurricane season. So there's that. And yeah, I just don't see it happening till October at the earliest, and I feel like that's perfectly fine if it takes till October. There's no big deal. At this point, for the second orbital flight test, I just want them to take their time and get it right. Mostly because my prediction for how's that orbital flight test going to go, I think that they're going to get through staging. I think that they're going to get Starship pretty into that near orbit trajectory, and I think they're going to get it up to entry interface. So that's what I'm hoping for. I think that they're going to go pretty far with this flight test. I think I don't want to say the first test that kind of, because obviously any test you get data from is a good test, but the first test had been hyped up as look at how amazing this is going to be, and it didn't fall flat because you got data and you got everything you wanted, but it didn't exactly make in the public zeitgeist outside of us spaceflight people and sort of the regular world, if you will. Those of us who don't deal with spaceflight every day, a lot of people looked at that as a big screw up of a test. But I mean, obviously for us who are involved in engineering and understand how the industry works, that was exactly what you could have hoped for on the first flight of a super big, complicated machine like that. So I feel like this time there's hopefully going to be a lot more understanding from that. I feel like compared to Booster 4 and Ship 20 at the booster combo and ship combo, whichever they're going to do, I think it's Booster 9 and Ryan, Ryan will know which ship it is that they're going to want for that. They are definitely the construction already. You can already see with Booster 9 that it's been significantly better built than Booster 4 was. So I have a lot more faith in this vehicle than I do the Booster 4 Ship 20 combo. So I'm going to bet it all and go to entry interface.
All right. I think that's all I can ask you. All right. So unless there's any last comments from the chat room before we move on, but yeah, I just have to tread lightly. I have to tread lightly. I'm excited though. Like when I leave here, I'm going down to Starbase for a few weeks, and if I'm lucky, maybe I'll get to see a launch, or maybe I should just figure out how to align my schedule so that's what happens. I'd love to see one in person.
I think I just want to bring up Hoopball's comment, which is that the FAA is not a problem. Otherwise, SpaceX would have filed its application by now. The FAA can move quick. So, I feel like that's a really good point. And that's one that's always missed because people love, I don't know what it is, if it's just simply because the FAA is the government agency on the front lines of making sure that people don't fly their rockets into cities. But yeah, they're often the punching bag, and I feel like they very often get assigned that role incorrectly. I feel like sometimes there's a lot of shooting oneself in their own foot that happens with many things. So, but that's just my opinion. So.
All right. I'm excited to see who's most correctest about all of this. Ryan,
we're writing it down, right? We're writing it down, right?
Someone in the chat room should write this down. Someone should write this down. So Ryan is saying potentially end of August, but just up to staging. And Jared is saying, no. What'd you say? October, was it?
October.
September? October, but you think it's going full bore. You think it's making it to entry interface.
Yeah, I mean, I thought the idea was to get through reentry and the aqua breaking or whatever we're going to call it in the ocean with that there. But I mean, we'll I feel like it's going to start to begin reentry. As to what happens after that, all bets are off, or depending upon how many tiles are off. So
I think hydro breaking.
We'll figure it out.
Yeah.
Well, then we'll put it on a shirt.
To Ryan's point though, we'll come up with something really cool and then rebrand it 2 more times until it's something lame.
If it goes up, Jared, I guarantee it'll come back down.
Well, that's true. The first flight test did the same thing, so it went up and then it came back down. So
great. Thanks everyone. That's fantastic. Thanks. All right, moving on. So thank you very much for carrying the show while I couldn't. And now let's toss it back over to Jared, actually, if you had a fun astrology story for us.
Oh, astrology story. Thank you.
I'm just trying to get under your skin.
Thank you, Jamie. Successfully. Do you see that? Successfully done. Thank
I'm
you
an
for
Aquarian.
that.
What does that mean?
You're an Aquarian?
Yeah, what's that mean for my week, Jared?
That means that your week will be full of turbulence, and you will lose sapphire status. Anyways, I'm just being mean. I'm sorry, but
horns and sirens and glites and glitz.
Oh yeah. Oh, thanks, Dada. Thanks.
Nice one, Dada. That was pretty good. But I did want to talk a little bit about a story related to my shirt here. So maybe I should just do the rest of the show like this with my shirt. Which, if you don't know what this is the actual cover to the Voyager Golden Record, which I have thought often of getting this as a back tattoo, just in case. You never know who may pick you up with that there. But Voyager 2, we lost contact with Voyager 2 over the past week. Unfortunately, there was a problem with some commands that were sent to Voyager 2, and Usually the two Voyager spacecraft, Voyager 1 and Voyager 2, who we are still talking to today, they require themselves to be pointing directly at the Earth. So that means that they're constantly in contact with us. That way we can continue to hear from them as they continue out there. Now, just to give you an idea of how far away they are, Voyager 2 just crossed over 20 billion kilometers away from us, and Voyager 1 is the furthest out. It's over 24 billion kilometers away from us. Sorry, I'm not used to speaking about talking to spacecraft in terms of billions of kilometers, let alone tens of billions of kilometers. But we accidentally commanded Voyager 2 to not look at the Earth anymore.
Oh, no.
Like, oh darn! We need to. We're gonna have to wait till October, everybody. Because that's when it will use its star tracker to kind of check in and make sure that it's pointed in the correct direction. So don't worry, everybody. In about 2.5 months, we'll see if we're still in contact with Voyager 2. Luckily, Voyager 2, just kind of went ahead and did its thing and came back into contact with us, and we've been talking to it since. Yeah, that was a very nice save on the part of NASA over the past week. I mean, you can imagine basically trying to troubleshoot a system from 20 billion kilometers away, and that's what NASA and the folks at JPL were having to do, because JPL is still doing most of the groundwork here on the Voyager spacecraft. So, which is just like amazing to think about, because we're coming up, in 2027. That will be the 50th anniversary of their operation. So we're 46 years into their operation. That's ridiculous. Like I can't think of many people with that. And Jason is actually saying, yeah, Jason's got it right there with it, which is that didn't the Deep Space Network do a Hail Mary and recover Voyager 2 last week? Yeah, it was essentially a Hail Mary with that to get them back. So.
What did they do? How could they do a Hail Mary if it's not pointed? You don't have commanding. Do they just like send a bunch of commands in the blind and go, hope one makes it?
So it's not so much sending commands in the blind. It's that at some point the Voyager spacecraft, as Hoopball is saying, automatic realignment, smart feature to have as a backup. And then Eka bringing up a really good point here, which is that they heard that it pointed about 2 degrees off, which is more than the orbit of Saturn at the distance that it is out there. So, yes. So it was literally just a small alignment. By the way, if you're wondering how big 2 degrees is, you can make a fist, the average human fist, held at arm's length, one of your fingers is going to be about 2 degrees of coverage on the sky there. So literally like a finger's width off on Voyager out there, so pretty far. But yeah, they have the ability. Voyager has the ability to do automatic realignments, and they're built into their schedule. And we had one, and it brought it back, and voila, there you go. So that's the save for a little bit of human error there at that time. So yeah, so we're glad to have Voyager 2 back. They are still doing actual instrumentation. They're still doing actual science with the instrumentation on the Voyager spacecraft. Voyager 2 has the biggest suite of all of them. It still has 5 of its original 10 instruments operating. Voyager 1's got 4 of them, and they're both basically looking at things like plasma and charged particles and magnetic fields and cosmic rays and other things like that. So in studying that, because they're outside of the solar system, they don't have any of the interference of the sun. They're essentially outside of most of the influence of the sun's solar wind. Therefore, they are literally able to sample interstellar space directly. And we've been getting a wealth of data from them for over a decade now with that. So yeah, it's been really, really exciting.
What have they figured out about interstellar space, right? Like, these are the only spacecraft we have in interstellar space, correct?
Yes.
Yeah, what have they sent back that's interesting?
Well, one of the more interesting things that they have found with comparisons to interstellar space is actually that the solar wind of the sun has been slowing down ever so slightly over the course of their mission. So over that very long, over that very that 4 decade long period of time, and they were still within the influence of the sun's solar wind. They were detecting that it was ever so minutely slowing down, which was very interesting. What does that mean about the sun? So still trying to figure things like that out, especially using spacecraft that we have within our own solar system that are specifically dedicated to studying the sun. Like in orbit around the Earth, we have Solar Dynamics Observatory, which helps do that. We also have Discover out in one of the Earth-Sun Lagrange points, which is basically sampling the solar wind at all times. The European Space Agency SOHO is working on that. Also, the Solar Orbiter now, which is another mission from the European Space Agency that's we're finally starting to integrate its data into models and things like that. So, we're literally the edge of the solar system, giving us big questions about the actual thing in the middle of the solar system. So, right, like I don't think anybody was really expecting Voyager to pull that off, but here we are, and it did.
And when is it scheduled to become V'ger?
First of all, I think we've got to go through a few more. Because I don't know if you remember, Jamie, but it's actually Voyager 6 that becomes V'ger. So we've got to get 3, 4, and 5 sent out, and then it's got to go through 6. And then we have to find a black hole that's close enough so that it goes through it to the other side of the galaxy, and then I bet you didn't think I knew that much about Star Trek.
I didn't actually, but I'm impressed. I'm very impressed.
But I do. Thank you, Tracy and Kenny, for sitting me down and turning me into a Trekkie over the past year and a half. So you're welcome. You're welcome, Jamie.
All right, awesome, fantastic. And actually, just really quickly, we're talking a lot about solar wind. Like, what does solar wind do to us, and why do we care?
Oh, so great question. First of all, the overall great question: why do we care? Well, the solar wind, big stream of charged particles coming off of the sun. We like to we like to study it because it can affect satellites that are in orbit around the Earth. The Earth does have its own magnetic field, which gets turned into this thing called a magnetosphere. So I always like to think of it as like a magnetic field jellyfish coming off of the sun, or off of the Earth, that interacts with the solar wind. And the solar wind is very, very strong. It can push the magnetosphere back and make it very, very sleek and cool looking. But at the same time, that means that satellites get out of the magnetosphere and get exposed to that solar wind. It can induce charges on satellite surfaces, things like photovoltaics, so the actual circuit boards inside a satellite, and fry them. And in addition to that, if you have you can have solar events that are powerful enough that they can actually mess with electronics down here on the surface of the Earth, which is possible. Back in 1859, we had something called the Carrington event, which literally fried telegraph lines across the Earth. It had aurora that went down to Cuba, so like visible in Havana, Cuba, which is just like, I can't even imagine that. In London, the aurora were so bright in the middle of the night that you were able to read the newspaper by how bright that they were. It would basically wreck a lot of the modern electronics that we have today. And I just wouldn't recommend wanting to go through an experience like that. So monitoring things like the solar wind and trying to understand the interaction of the sun and the Earth together, very important to making sure that modern society doesn't kind of in one solar storm.
But forgive my ignorance. The Carrington event, that was because of a solar flare, not necessarily solar wind, correct?
Yes, but we can use solar wind to help predict these kinds of things that are happening. We can actually determine arrival times and other things using that. So, admittedly, we will not have a lot with our current spacecraft that we have, but anything is still better than nothing. So we would have probably maybe a couple of hours if we had a Carrington event kind of thing go on with that. So, and actually, Greg Woods is putting out another absolutely great example of that, which was Quebec 1989. There was a massive power outage that happened in that area of Canada, and that was caused by a solar storm. And you use things like the solar wind in order to figure out speed and charge and how potent something will be. So, and as Eka is pointing out too, which is that solar flares, they help make the disturbances in the solar wind. And that sums it up really well. Thank you.
I learned some stuff. I learned some things. Now, Ryan, I know you kind of took the beginning part of the show talking about Starship, mostly because I forced you to talk about Starship. I don't know if that was actually your story for the day, so I wanted. I mean,
that's all I've got. I haven't got anything else.
Fair enough.
That's pretty much all that's going on. So.
I agree, and actually, it sounds like they've just started venting. So if it's all right with everyone, I think I'm going to kind of wrap this show a little bit early. Also, I am in New York, and I have to go to a show. So selfishly, I got to wrap a little bit early. I do want to thank everyone very much for showing up today, and for keeping the live shows going, especially the members of Tomorrow who help contribute week after week, month after month to the shows themselves. There are many different levels you can subscribe at, and one of the really cool features of all membership levels is that there's a post-show, a after party, so to speak, where we'll just talk about anything. Maybe it's space related, maybe it's not, whatever the case may be. And you get exclusive access to that, so you can join, just kind of chat with us. By the way, one other neat thing that we're doing in the show is if you look in the description of the show, if you want to, and you certainly don't have to, there is a link at the top of the description that allows you to join the show yourself. And I'm going to try to start doing that for each individual show. So if you are interested in, say, the Starship conversation, and you want to join the show, audio and video, and actually be on camera and have a conversation with us, by all means, just click the link and join the show and talk about Starship with us, especially since I can't. help Ryan. Whoops, other way. Help Ryan out. I do feel bad because I'm like, hi, Ryan, talk about Starship. And then I just go, boop. So, yeah. But I appreciate you all. That's our show this week. Again, thank you all so much for joining. Oh yeah, exactly, just like that. That's our show. Thank you all so much for joining. I will try to be in the post show for just a few minutes, but then I will have to bail. So thank you all, and we'll see you next week.